Paul is flunking out of school. That's the concern right now.
I want to learn how to speak right. But they put too much pressure on me.
A crisis can occur at any time in every family. Sometimes an outsider is needed who offers objectivity and direction through counseling. This television program recreates counseling sessions with actors portraying family members. They are guided by a licensed social worker as the crisis counselor, Thom Thompson.
The cause of stuttering is still basically unknown. Children who stutter are quite often kidded by their peers and sometimes by their family as well. One belief is that if you just leave them alone, a stuttering child will outgrow it. But 20% of these children do not just outgrow their problem, even by their teen years. A private school in which Paul Marsh is enrolled has insisted his parents consult a counselor regarding his continued stuttering problems, especially because Mr. and Mrs. Marsh had previously refused to send Paul to a speech therapist that the school had suggested.
Well, the school called me, and they said that Paul was flunking, which is, it's hard for us to understand that, because Paul's, he does all his homework and everything, and they said that we have to come in and talk to you.
How old are you, Paul?
He's 14.
Wait, I want to hear from Paul.
14.
Honey,
14. Well, it's all right for Paul to communicate with me any way that he would like, and at any speed that he would like.
Well, it's just that he has a stuttering problem.
Sometimes I just help him because it's really hard for him, and
I noticed
that's
that.
probably one of the reasons in school that he's having trouble, because I think the teachers make him talk too much. My husband and I talked
They
about
try
it.
to get him to speak.
Yeah, and they know he's embarrassed, and they push him out there, and I just think it's cruel.
It's a very tough school. It's the school that I went to.
And the other kids make fun of him, and it's...
Well, the thing is, he's not flunking out. I know the principal of the school, and I talked to him, and I got Paul back into the school. So he's not...
I'm a little confused, though, because I talked to the school counselor. I know the principal there and the vice principal, as I told you, but I didn't talk to them. The counselor said, is it okay to say this, Paul, that you weren't doing so well?
But I do his homework with him every night. I mean, I go over every single answer that he gives, and I make sure it's right before he hands in his homework.
He's just dumb.
No, he is not
That's
dumb.
a terrible thing to
Well,
say.
I don't know if it's terrible. I guess maybe it is, maybe
Well,
it isn't.
Sharon gets A's in school all the
But it's a
time.
pretty
and
strong
just-
statement, Sharon. Why did you feel the need to say something so strong?
He's just so embarrassing to be around.
Oh, Sharon.
How old are you, Sharon?
13.
I'm 14, Paul.
They're very close. They've always been very close. And Sharon's a girl. She matures faster than he does, and
Sharon, you're doing all right in school presently?
she gets all A's. All A's, straight.
She's a real good student.
And Paul, how would you talk about your grades? How do you think you're...
Paul, there's no reason to start crying. Would you just stop crying?
Honey, use a Kleenex and just try, kind of.
You know, counselors really get torn about what to do at a moment like this. I couldn't miss what was happening with Paul. A lot of emotion pouring out of him. Tears. Some really difficult feelings.
He's a lot like me.
And do you know what I wanted to do to both of you? I wanted to reach him in a gentle way, not a meddling way, and say, sit back, parents. Let him talk. Let him cry. let him stutter. Because each time I wanted to hear something from him, or each time he has started expressing himself, you've told him not to do it.
But I'm just trying to help him because it's so hard for him. I mean, you know, I'm his mother and I love him, and I see him suffer like this, and
It is very hard to see him struggling to talk and not to do something. What happens, though, when you do just let him go ahead and struggle and get it out?
well, I used to stutter when I was little, and
That might have something to do with it, too.
How old were you when you had the stuttering problem?
well, by his age, I'd sort of outgrown it in school, and I thought that Paul would outgrow it by
So
now.
was that all along from the time you entered school or even before?
My aunt stuttered, my maiden aunt, and she lived with us, and everybody in my family just thought that I sort of learned it from her, you know.
Well, you actually don't learn stuttering, I'm fairly certain.
Well,
That's
she
what they
stayed home
thought.
with us and babysat, and my mother was a nurse, and my father was, you know.
Well, he has not gone through any of that. He's had a good family life. I am a good provider.
he's
I
a
have
very
done
good
very well for
father.
this family.
Yeah. He's been
I try to get him involved in things, believe me. I mean, I was an athlete when I was in high school and in college. I've coached the Little League teams. I've tried to get him. He won't even come out of the dugout. He starts shaking.
I was the first girl in our school to be on the Little League team, and I'm the captain.
She'll outgrow that when she gets into boys, but she's...
No.
Paul, somehow
Oh, honey.
I need to hear a little bit more from you.
Paul, talk to the man.
Wait, I want to say to you, and yet I don't want to step on your parental prerogative. I want you to let Paul be relaxed and to talk to me. I'm not bothered by Paul stuttering. Do you hear that, Paul? Doesn't bother me. I can wait as long as it takes. It doesn't really matter to me. I want you to hear that.
But lots of times people won't wait for him, and if he doesn't get it out, he just loses his chance. I mean, it's like...
All right, then let him talk. Let him talk.
But honey-
Just shut up.
But it's like...
Shut up. Talk, Paul.
They put so much pressure on me.
What kind of pressure do we put on you?
All the time they're just caring about him. Well, what about me? Don't you care about me?
Okay, I'm
Yes,
saying
we
it's-
care about you. Of course we care about you, but Paul is flunking out of school. That's the concern right now. You're the one pulling A's and playing baseball.
Well,
Honey, there is no reason to cry.
she's sort of taken, you know, she's a tomboy now, and she's sort of...
I'm not
That's
a
my
tomboy,
influence.
just
That's
like
my
Honey,
influence.
it's just a phase.
Do we realize that we have two children crying here? Why? Why is that happening? Let's just think about that a moment. I'm not sure I understand. How did it get that way? Why are we up at such a level of intensity here? We've sat down to talk for 15 minutes, and I'm feeling a pressure.
I don't know what else I can do.
Paul, are you... And this is going to be a hard one for me to ask because I know if I were the dad here instead of the counselor, I might not even want this question to be asked, or I might not want to hear what the answer is, but I'm going to ask it. Are you able to talk to your dad? Do you feel?
No, they never talk. I mean, I do all the time.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't mean to do this to you, but I want to hear it from Paul.
But it'll take him too long to tell you.
No, let him try and say. Let him try. Paul, answer him.
He always gets so upset, and he cries, and I can't hear that. I mean, I understand how he feels, and...
I
Say it. Would you just slow down and think about what you're going to say.
can't.
Try to answer Daddy. He loves you, sweetheart.
Just...
You know he does.
I
mean,
can't.
he talks
You can't
to
talk what?
Stop! Stop! I'm just amazed at what is happening here. I've got to somehow... I asked Paul a question. He got 3 syllables out. He wasn't taking a long time. You jumped in, and you jumped in. All of you several times. Paul, listen to me, please. Paul doesn't have a chance to talk right now.
But I'm only trying to help him.
I hope you believe me when I say that I believe you, that you are trying to help. Do you believe me? I think you are trying to help. But do you help
Well,
someone?
obviously it's not working. We do want to help him. Of course we want to help him. That's why we came to this.
Of course it is. You wouldn't have come here for any other reason.
Then tell us what are we supposed to do to him? What are we supposed to do with him? How are we supposed to handle him?
First of all, why isn't this child, or is this child? I don't know, but I haven't heard it. And I'm just remembering something that the school counselor told me. They made a referral to a speech therapist, and they're not aware that...
He doesn't need that. That's where all
If he just slows down and talks
they have retards
and thinks
in
about
that
what he's going to
class.
say, he
Mental
doesn't need...
retards, and he's
Oh,
a
excuse
smart
me,
boy.
that's not right at all.
Yes, they do. They have mental retards in speech class. I know they do. I have a friend whose son is in the class.
I just have to correct you very much. The speech therapist that Paul was being referred to has nothing at all to do with mental retardation.
He doesn't need a speech therapist.
They call them
Excuse me.
handicapped, and he's not
He
handicapped.
can't get any
He'll
better.
outgrow it eventually.
Excuse me, in my professional judgment, Paul certainly does need a speech therapist. It has nothing to do with mental retardation, and he shouldn't ever be, I can tell that much, without even going further. He's not a mentally limited child.
No, he's not. He's
Well,
really smart.
then let's just clear
Well, then what
that
the hell
up.
does he need a therapist for?
I'd
isn't that
rather
what a
teach him at home.
therapist
I don't
is?
understand
Is
why I
they,
can't.
You asked me the
You have to-
question, then let me answer. The reason he needs it is that if you've been stuttering for how long, Paul?
Since he was 3.
You answered for him. And I know that we're in a habit of doing that, Paul. How long do you remember that you have been stuttering?
Tell him, honey, you know. That's... Say it.
Just say,
the
since
word.
I was 3.
Well, 3. See, I could teach him at home. 3. Say 3.
seeing
Just
what's happening?
think.
Are
Slow
you seeing
down.
it?
If we stop answering for him, can't we try that? Can't we try and stop answering for him and give him an opportunity to talk
There are
and
two
to finish
things.
his sentence?
There are two things that I can see right now that Paul needs. Many more than 2, but there are 2 big ones. He does need the help of a speech therapist, and I'd like to be able to finish this sentence. Let me do it. If you've stayed inside a speech pattern for that long, that speech pattern gets installed and maintained and actually creates little tracks literally in the brain for doing it the same way over and over and over, and could become a lifelong habit. There has been no promise at all that a person would grow out of it. That
But I did.
speech, and you're different. You're not Paul. Paul's not you.
But I can help him because I already know.
That's the second thing. If he does get, and I say he must get with a speech therapist. By the way, I need to share something with you. I don't think that school, even with your intervention, is going to let him stay unless he does get a speech therapist. Do you know that they fully expected you to follow through on that referral? Didn't they tell you that when you called?
But I started working with him home right away. I mean, we did. We worked on things.
All right. If we need a
Didn't
speech
we,
therapist,
Paul?
we'll send
Didn't
him
we
to a
work
speech
on it,
therapist, honey.
Tell him we worked on it.
You've
Tell
been
him.
trying for 11 years and
Okay.
haven't
I
been
didn't
getting
tell
very
you
far,
that.
so why don't we send him to a speech
Boy,
therapist?
I didn't tell
I
you
like
that
what you
because I knew
did.
you'd be upset.
Let's let Paul talk. It was your idea, wasn't it?
He does pretty good when it's...
I have never heard him complete a sentence.
Mr. and Mrs. Marsh, I want to do a little experiment, and I need your cooperation in this too. I want to do a little pretend at this point, strange as that may sound. First of all, I got to get a promise from both of you and from Sharon. I don't want you to say anything for 2 minutes. Can you promise that?
Yes?
Can you?
Oh, sure.
Will you? There's the watch. I want 2 minutes of total silence from the 3 of you. I want you to do one more thing. I want you to look over at that wall. Go ahead. Look at that wall, both of you. And I want you to maintain that posture and be silent for 2 minutes. Sharon, I want you to look at that wall. Just turn over there. This is a pretend. Don't turn back and don't say anything. Paul, I want you to pretend. You understand what pretend is, what a fantasy is. I want you to pretend that your parents and your sister are not in this room, and I want you to talk to me. No one is going to interrupt you, and I'm one of the most interested listeners you've ever had. Tell me how you've been feeling about what's been happening here today.
I don't know.
Do you think that you might need some help from a speech therapist?
I want to learn how to speak right, but they put too much pressure on me.
How do they do that?
When I talk,
It's okay, they're not here. Talk to me, and I'm really listening.
when I talk, they interrupt me. They just put too much pressure on me. I can't explain it.
Do you feel you've been talking pretty clearly and that you've gotten words out pretty well in the last minute or two?
Yes.
So do I. Please come back, parents and Sharon. Did you hear? You weren't here, but part of you was here. Did you hear what I heard? It's got to be a shock to you. I mean, isn't it? Tell me what you heard.
I don't think that in the busy day that we have time to do this kind of thing. I mean, this is 2 minutes, and if Paul has a lot to say, it could take an hour.
I
And
learned a lot in that 2 minutes, and it was actually a little bit less than that, by the way.
I know it sounds.
He spoke very clearly to me.
I understand you're trying to help us, but
I
it's not
heard what he
practical.
said, and his stuttering declined markedly, didn't it? Let's just look at facts, didn't it? The point is, I took the pressure off for him. Through getting a promise from you, he immediately improved. What does that tell us? Do I have to tell you what that tells us? I know I'm getting through to you. I can see that on your face.
What am I going to do when his father asks him a question and he wants an answer, and the pressure's on me?
Why don't you let his father and him work that out? Why don't you stop rushing in to save Paul every time? Because you're really saving yourself, aren't you? I know I'm being tough on you right now, but aren't you remembering? You've told me over and over, and I listen hard to you. Aren't you remembering how tough it was for you, and you want to rush in and be his savior? That's just the problem. Everybody's rushing in, and Paul doesn't get a chance to talk. But even if you released, now this is important, even if you released all this pressure just like that, you let it go, which will be awfully hard, by the way, but even if you did, he still needs speech therapy, badly. Please hear me that in my professional judgment and the judgment of the teachers and the principal of the school, he needs that referral, and I honestly don't think that they will keep him in that school unless he gets it. Dad, I haven't heard anything from you. But I know when someone sees the light.
I love you.
Of course. Stuttering, or any similar problem, can be very harmful to a child's development because it involves what I would call self-presentation, which in turn strongly affects the child's self-concept and self-esteem. Whether it's stuttering or being under or overweight or perceiving that one is too tall or too short, many problems plague the child or the teenager precisely because they want to present themselves to the world in an acceptable way. To all of us, feedback confirms and encourages a regard for self and a self-esteem that helps us feel a sense of strong personal identity. And I think stuttering is so special because communication is central in this self-presentation that I've been talking about. Parents are often painfully embarrassed and disappointed when their child stutters. Some parents mistakenly assume that if the child would only try harder, they'd be able to stop stuttering. And while it is true that children with the help of a speech therapist can learn new control of their speech, their stuttering pattern is largely beyond their control and is caused by a mixture of speech habits learned early in life, perhaps some problems in the way children even hear their own speech, or there may be an emotional component to the presentation of speech as well. We have learned this, that when parental or other pressures are applied, the stuttering pattern usually becomes worse, which I think confirms the emotional component. As I pointed out to Mr. and Mrs. Marsh, the pressures need to be lifted, and most importantly, there needs to be an immediate referral to a speech therapist with whom I would work while I continue to talk to Paul and to counsel his parents. Let's work together to have health and love and growth in your family and in mine. I'm Thom Thompson.